Bladed trainers are as popular as ever, but which one is the right one for you? Today we're comparing the Zoomfly 6 with the waverider Flash 2. What's up everybody, I'm Eric McIntyre, aka RadDadBot, and you're watching RadDadBot TV, where we review running shoes. Today, like I said, we're comparing the Zoomfly 6 with the waverider Flash 2. And if it's your first time watching one of my videos, you may notice some timestamps below. Please feel free to jump around to the various parts of this comparison, but if you do so, I would sure appreciate if you come back and watch the full thing when you get a second. And if you've been a viewer for a while, you've seen some of my videos, and you haven't yet hit that subscribe button, please consider doing so today and turning on notifications so you get notified every time I drop a new video. Now, starting this video out with some quick disclaimers and disclosures, I did purchase the waverider Flash 2 with my own money for the purpose of review. That being said, I did get a discount from my local running store as I've created content from them in the past. Now, Mizuno I have received shoes from in the past as well, but I'm not being paid, nor have I been given talking tracks, talking points. No one's gonna watch this video beforehand. All thoughts are entirely my own. Now with the Nike, I did receive the shoe directly from Nike, but still the same thing. I was not paid, no talk tracks, talking points, no one watches the video. I'm not actually required to include the shoe in any specific content. And as always, all thoughts are entirely my own. Now, starting us off with the intended use of these two shoes, if you watch my videos, you know super trainers are the marathon training companions to super shoes. If you watch my videos, you know that super trainers are the marathon training companions to super shoes. All that means is that they are going to be a little bit more durable than your race shoe, but at the same time, they're not going to have all of the premium tech. They're going to be a little bit dumbed down so that they do last longer and so that they can handle a little bit more of those bulk miles in a marathon build. Now for Nike, you have the Zoomfly, which is kind of the little brother to the Vaporfly and the Alphafly, and then for Mizuno you have the waverider Flash, which is again the little brother to the waverider Pro. Now from a price perspective, both these shoes come in at $170, which is fairly affordable for plated trainers. Some brands are trying to push their plated trainers up towards the 200 mark, maybe a little bit under, but 170 is kind of where they started and where I believe they should stay within kind of the running shoe mix. Then from a specs perspective, the waverider Flash comes in at 8.4 ounces, which is 238 grams, and the Zoomfly is just slightly heavier at 8.6 ounces and 244 grams. Then from a stack perspective, the Flash comes in at 47.5 in the heel, 46.5 in the forefoot for a 0.5 heel to toe drop. Meanwhile, the Zoomfly comes in at 40 in the heel, 32 in the forefoot for an 8mm heel to toe drop. Now, obviously, when looking at these specs, I did get these specs, by the way, from Running Warehouse because they measure independently. Running Warehouse does not measure from necessarily like the World Athletics approved points. They just measure from kind of the, like, maybe the eyeball test. I'm not actually sure their exact methodology, but when I say 47.5, they're measuring from that thickest point here in the heel, and then the same thing, that thickest point here in the forefoot. So obviously when you consider this cutout in the heel, the drop is going to feel a little bit different. Now from a fit perspective, the waverider Flash is very narrow. It's one of the more narrow shoes that I've worn, not just in the last year, but maybe ever when it comes to running shoes. Like, it is a very, very narrow and very snug fit. The toe box itself is fairly average, I would say, and then lengthwise, I do feel like it fits true to size, but maybe a tiny bit short. So with the width of the shoe and the length of the shoe, you may want to consider half sizing up, but I did wear my normal 10.5, and I don't feel like I would have benefited from that extra half size. I feel like at that point, the shoe would have been a little bit sloppy. Now the Zoomfly 6, I would say, is on the more standard or like wider for Nike, but Nike does oftentimes tend to fit a little bit narrow. So it's not necessarily wide foot friendly, but it is more accommodating than most Nikes. I would say the toe box is actually fairly roomy for a Nike actually. And then the heel, I would say, is like more of a standard overall heel, but lengthwise, I would say that the shoe does fit true to size. So I would not half size up or down. Now moving to the upper, the shoes have very actual similar uppers. So the Nike Zoomfly 6 has what's called a woven mesh, but you have kind of this synthetic material over top and then that mesh on the bottom. And then with the waverider Flash, you have what's called a engineered mesh, but same thing, you kind of have this synthetic material and then a layer of kind of regular mesh on the bottom. So you kind of have this dual layer, like top layer synthetic, bottom layer regular mesh feel in both shoes, and both shoes are fairly breathable because of that. From a lockdown perspective, the waverider Flash is going to be super well locked down. Like, you're not going to shift it all in the shoe. That's partially because it's so narrow, but the tongue is actually not gusseted, which was a little bit of a surprise to me. The heel is a little bit more rigid in the waverider Flash, and then you also don't get quite as much cushion in the upper, because we'll talk about the midsoles, but I think most of the weight of the waverider Flash is in the midsole, versus with the Zoomfly, I feel like the shoe is a little bit more balanced. So you do have a nice kind of heel flare there in the upper, and you do have some nice heel cushion. The tongue itself is, it is actually gusseted or at least stitched into the shoe. And so for the most part, I think that the Zoomfly is going to be a little bit more comfortable of an upper, a little bit more plush of an upper, but I will say that the Wave Rebellion Flash 2 is probably a little bit more breathable overall. Now moving to those midsoles, in the Zoomfly 6 you have a top layer of Zoom X and a bottom layer of SR2 foam plus a carbon fiber plate. Now the SR2 foam is going to be an EVA based foam. It's going to be a lot more stable, so it's going to give you a little bit more of a stable ride overall in the shoe. The base is also fairly wide for a Nike, so I find that the Zoomfly 6 is actually fairly stable and accommodating to probably a wide variety of foot strike types, despite being a little bit higher drop. Then you have that Zoom X foam up top, and again, carbon fiber plate in the middle. So that's where you get a lot of the responsiveness. The Zoom X is going to be that PEBA-based racing foam that Nike uses. It's basically the original racing foam. It's hyper responsive, hyper bouncy, but then when paired with that SR2 foam, you actually get like a fast yet controlled ride that's very, very pace versatile. So what's nice about the Zoomfly 6 is I think a lot of people could race in the shoe, and it's going to be a really good race option that is still fairly stable. But like if you want to go run a workout and you want to do a few warm-up miles, you don't necessarily have to change your shoe from warm-up to actual intervals, versus in the Wave Rebellion Flash, like, you know, you probably do want to wear a different shoe to warm up just because of the aggressive nature and geometry of the shoe. So shifting over to the Flash has the Mizuno Energy Light Plus up top, which is actually a PEBA-based foam. And then you just have the Energy foam on the bottom, which is a TPE-based foam. And then you have a fiberglass plate in the middle. So the shoe's not going to be quite as rigid actually as the Zoomfly, but like that TPE foam on the bottom, that Energy foam, is a lot firmer than any of the foams in the Nike. And then Mizuno's formulation of PEBA in this shoe in particular is just not quite as bouncy or soft as the Zoomfly. So the shoe is still fast, the shoe is still responsive, but given the aggressive nature with that cutout and that kind of, they call it the smooth speed assist geometry in the shoe, it feels like the shoe is better suited for shorter, faster paces, for me at least. And obviously you're not going to be running easy in this shoe. So like if I was doing a workout, I would typically wear a different shoe to warm up and then change into this one to do like the core, like speed focus part of the workout. The other thing, as you can imagine, with the narrowness of the shoe plus the aggressive geometry, this is not a very stable shoe overall. So it's a very fun shoe. I actually really enjoy running in this and feel very fast in the shoe. I've done, you know, lots of speed work, lots of long runs, different miles in the shoe. And like, I like this shoe a lot, and I was not expecting to. But I do think that the Zoomfly is just going to be a little bit more accommodating overall. Now moving to the outsoles, both of these shoes actually have fairly good grippy outsoles, which that's really, really nice with speed-oriented shoes, because I think historically you just, you know, if you're trying to save weight, you're not going to have as aggressive of an outsole. So the waffle pattern on the Zoomfly does really, really good, and I don't know if they changed the rubber compound in this shoe versus some of the other shoes with the waffle pattern, but it does seem to outperform most of Nike's, not just performance line, but daily training line, in my opinion. I ran on wet roads, light snow, flurries, things like that in this shoe, and it really, really did a phenomenal job overall. Now with the Wave Rebellion Flash, the traction pattern maybe isn't quite as aggressive, or you don't have as many aggressive lugs, but that traction pattern actually still does a phenomenal job, and the shoe, same thing, is very, very grippy. So even more than the Zoomfly, I actually ran on some fairly icy roads and icy patches in the Wave Rebellion Flash, as I reviewed this one a couple of months ago here in the middle of winter in Utah. And I will say, like, I was very, very impressed overall with that grip. And I do think that that's necessary given the instability that the shoe has and the aggressiveness that the shoe has. But I was pleasantly surprised with the grip of both of these shoes. Now, as far as my pick between the two, you know, it's one of the situations where like I reviewed, or I compared the Zoomfly 6 with the Deviate Nitro 3 last week. And like, I like both shoes a lot, but I went Zoomfly 6 because of the increased versatility, where the Deviate Nitro 3, phenomenal shoe. A lot of people chose that as their favorite plated trainer of last year. But for me, it was too aggressive to kind of have a variety of workouts in the shoe, and it kind of got regulated towards shorter, faster intervals, and that was about it. And that's kind of the same feel that I have towards the Rebellion Flash. Like, I've done a ton of different style workouts in the shoe, but where it shined best, or where it would outperform the Zoomfly for me, is in those shorter, faster intervals, right? Every other type of run, I would probably be taking the Zoomfly because it's just gonna be a little bit more forgiving underfoot. But as with any shoes, I think this will come down heavily to preference, and it will just come down to, yeah, which one makes you feel better, which one does better for your stride, for your foot. Now, just some final thoughts on the shoes. The plated trainer category is super, super competitive, and I think that for the most part, brands are either like just really hitting, like swinging it out of the park, or like completely bombing and falling flat on their face. Like, I haven't tried a lot of mediocre super trainers, right? Both of these to me are really, really good, right? Last year, you know, the Deviate Nitro 3, really, really good. Meanwhile, there were a few that I'm not gonna name right now that I just, more of like those more max cushion types that I just didn't feel like really got the job done, and ended up feeling overly stable or kind of lethargic to me. So I hope that both of these brands take what worked in these two shoes and continue to just add to it and innovate around the edges of these two shoes. And I hope that's true for the entire super shoe category, right? Like, everyone has kind of come up to the same level at this point. Everyone has a really good plated trainer. Everyone has a really good super shoe. And you know, I think a lot of brands are going to be trying to take some big swings, some big risks to outperform others, and I just don't know where they're going to change because there's only so many things you can do to a shoe. But as far as where shoes are in 2025, I'm very, very happy with the quality that we're getting across the board from brands. The performance lines are really, really jumping off the ground, jumping off the roads, jumping off the trails. And it's trickling down into daily training, which I think is the most exciting part, because you can get some really, really good shoes for like $140, $150 right now, where that technology just wasn't available at that price point before. Anyway, if you're still here, I sure appreciate you. Please take a second, if you haven't already, let me know in the comments what you enjoyed, or what I could be doing better to make these more educational, entertaining, or whatever it is for each and every one of you. If you have another shoe comparison that you'd like to see or you'd like me to do, let me know in the comments what that is. And if I have the shoe, I'll do my best to record that video. Obviously, if I don't have the shoe, I can only review what I have. And again, if you made it this far and you haven't hit the subscribe button, please consider doing that now and turning on notifications so you get notified every time I drop a new video. Now, as always, I'll round us out with a question, which is, do you typically keep a super trainer in your rotation, or do you prefer just to use super shoes even for your workouts? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks, everybody.